Hey guys, we are live here. Welcome to the Bags to Riches podcast. I'm Zach Ginn, your host. I'm joined today by the last person from Batch Leads. We finally got him in, Ivo Draginov. Ivo is the co-founder of Batch Leads. He is a real estate investor and wholesaler out of Phoenix, Arizona. He is just an awesome dude, and he's going to talk a little bit about SMS marketing today, some of the changing struggles a lot of people are having in 2020 and 2021 about it, and how to actually have the most success possible. Thank you so much, Ivo, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Zach. Happy
Awesome.
to share anything.
Great. So let's start from the beginning here. Can you do a quick story for anyone that is completely new to who you are or Batch Leads? So, how did you get into real estate?
So I actually started in 2018, actually in real estate. I got my real estate license when I was 17. Actually, when I turned 18, I took the class at 17, got my license at 18. And I just started fixing and flipping. So I did fixing and flipping part-time. Primarily, I was working at my dad's construction company. It was a plumbing, air conditioning construction company. At the time, so after hours, I'd literally go and fix and flip houses and work on the houses and remodel them myself, and that's how I started. I was doing about 3 to 5 a year the first couple of years. I kind of increased a little bit after that to maybe 6 to 8 houses per year after that. And in 2015, I decided to I just don't enjoy my day-to-day on my plumbing, air conditioning, construction side as much. So I wanted to just do real estate full time. So I basically, again, started doing full-time. I started fixing and flipping a lot more houses. I did 17 that year in 2015. And, inventory kind of started drying up I'm trying to buy and sell houses. I obviously have to have my profit margins. So I started buying from a lot of wholesalers. And when I started buying from wholesalers, one time I noticed, hey, this guy's selling me a property. I'm going to make money. I know I'm going to make money on it. And I did end up making about $28,000 on that property. But I noticed on the settlement statement, there was an assignment fee of $15,000. There was another assignment fee of $15,000. I'm like, what is happening here? I had no idea what an assignment fee is. And I called the title company. And she's like, well, this person's bought it for 87. I forgot the numbers. This person bought it for 87. They sold it to this person for 15,000 profit. They sold it to that person for another 15,000 of profit. And then you're buying it basically at the end. I'm like, okay. So then I started looking into wholesaling, what wholesaling is, and all of those things. Got into it with A&E at the time, and then things. We started doing full time fixing and flipping, wholesaling at the same time. We had a lot of fix and flips at the time, 2015, 2016. Later on, I met Jesse, which obviously you did a podcast with him, and then we partnered up, and we started. We had some needs that weren't kind of getting met with some of the technologies and CRMs, lead generation platforms, and how to manage our data. So we actually just started. We hired a couple of developers, and we wanted to solve a problem that we were facing. And then, after, $25,000 worth of work, we're like, well, maybe we can resell this thing. And then, those $25,000 investment turned into a lot more, basically. But we basically brought in a couple people hey, I'm using, but we told them, hey, this is how we manage our data. They asked, hey, can we use it? So that's how the whole, Batch Leads idea started. At the time, it used to be called Batch Lead Stacker. We renamed it later on, but that was how the whole project started. And just in a nutshell, that's kind of my story.
Yeah. So also, you guys do a lot of skip tracing and SMS, but I think a lot of people have heard your story, and I think it's really relatable for a lot of people. Starting out, everyone's got one. Who was your guru that kind of got you in or got your foot in the door?
With wholesaling or?
Wholesaling.
Oh, definitely Sean Terry, by far.
Oh man, that guy's the GOAT over there. He's a great dude.
He's the best. I just talked to him a couple of days ago. Still look up to him. He's definitely one of the people that I definitely look up to and try to learn from for a lot of different areas.
Yeah. So right now, after talking to Jesse, you guys are all together on all these deals. Are you primarily doing wholesaling now, or are you doing other ventures?
No, we I want to say like kind of graduated from like wholesale, to be honest, for the most part, earlier in the year, like January, February type of thing, and we just focus on some bigger deals. We have 51 manufactured houses we're putting out in Kingman, not Kingman, Whitman, Arizona. We have 22 or 23, I think 22 houses got approved from the city, single family residential houses we're building from the ground up, and also a 60, give or take 60 unit apartment complex that we're working on. So we're just working on some bigger deals. We bought another like 11 unit apartment complex we're going to be doing from the ground up. So we're just doing a lot of like new development now at the moment.
Okay. And are those like bigger deals, like the manufactured houses and the apartment complexes? Are you trying to cash out on them, or this is something for like long-term income you're trying to do?
Honestly, so the manufactured houses we are going to resell. We may end up keeping some of them. We'll see. There's still like we've sold a bunch of them. There's still more that are coming in the pipeline, just because there's a lot of like obviously through the whole coronavirus situation, even the manufactured houses got pushed back with like timelines and when they're going to be completed. So we're still selling a lot of those, and as we complete them, we list them on the market and we sell them. Again, we may end up keeping some of them, but the majority of them we're going to sell. The same for those 22 single family houses. The idea is to sell them. And the apartment complex, that's more of kind of the area where we may end up keeping the majority of them.
Okay.
We're gonna obviously we have a smaller unit, 11 units that we're gonna be doing. Those we're gonna keep, and we're probably gonna refinance and again keep long term.
Awesome. So back to batch leads. So if you can kind of do a quick synopsis of what batch leads is, because I know a lot of new people ask me like, "Hey, Zach, what's batch leads?" Because it's a long explanation. You got skip tracing, list scrubbing, SMS. So can you talk about the whole thing about batch leads?
Yeah, so it's basically a prospecting platform in a nutshell, to where it's you use batch leads before you can actually say, hey, this person is my lead, and I need to basically send a contract to him in a way. So batch leads is the prospecting platform. It allows you to get your list, so you can say, hey, I live in Houston. Let's say we had some guys actually from Houston today that were on Steve Chang's podcast. That I have to do a little demonstration for. So the guys are basically, hey, we're in Houston. I show them how to, hey, you just type in Houston. You want vacant properties, maybe absentee owners. You can get those properties. You can just click a couple buttons. You can skip trace them, meaning that you can get their contact information, phone numbers, emails, and so forth. And then you can potentially, if you wanted to, you can send them text messages. Hey, I want to, buy your house type of thing message. Or you can, we just recently implemented our dialer integration, to where you can just, say, hey, I want to push this to my dialer campaigns. So it'll go into your dialer campaigns, and then whoever's cold calling, maybe you have a team, maybe you're doing it yourself, you can do it. So it just makes it, oh, and I forgot to mention the most important part, you can always list stack and manage your data in there. So list stacking is the whole concept of, hey, I want to be able to figure out who's the most motivated sellers out there. So if you have a list of, let's say, vacant properties, you have a list of tax default properties, maybe like an inherited or probate or whatever other lists you have, you can say, hey, I want to see properties that are on, and I'll give you a perfect example. Today, when I was just doing a demo in one of our accounts, we said, hey, I want to see properties that are on tax default, that are vacant, and that were in pre-foreclosure. Those three variables, and there was about 3 properties from within the database. It was a test account that we had, so I have no idea honestly what properties were in there, but basically 3 results came. So those 3 properties again were tax default, did I say vacant, and then pre-foreclosures, and those are going to be great properties for you to contact and try to get a hold of those people and just ask them, hey, do you want to sell your house? I'm a local investor trying to buy another rental or another investment property. Would you be interested in a cash offer? So, so in a nutshell, that's what Batch Leads is a prospecting platform.
Oh wow. Okay. I mean, in my personal opinion, I've used kind of all of Batch Lead stuff, Batch Driven, all that fun before. It was going out before, but I've used all of it. In my personal opinion, I think the biggest moneymaker on there is the SMS part. I mean, the cold calling, you can probably make a good amount of money, but in my personal business, I mean, the SMS it's amazing. So the real question I had for you here with SMS is, it's been a mess for a lot of people. I mean, it's been a cat and mouse game. Obviously, that's how, I mean, cold calling used to be back in the day. But can you kind of explain what's going on in the SMS texting side of things? I know you're in the up and up about everything here. I mean, you're the systems dude. So can you tell me, like, what's going on with SMS? Like, why is there some people that are doing really well and some that aren't on other platforms?
Yeah. So I'll try to explain it as best as I can. There's some people that are texting. We had some users on our platform about 4 months ago that were sending out 60,000+ messages per day.
Oh my God.
So unfortunately, we basically got, for lack of better words, let's say from some of the carriers, like kind of cease and desist type of thing, to where like we have to stop the mass sending at that level. So we had to make some changes and kind of lower people's sending volumes, because a lot of people were complaining. We talked to a lot of lawyers, and this is just literally this week actually, that there's been obviously like some more cases with people buying and selling houses, investors, not so much realtors, but obviously realtors fall in that same category. And it's just that what's happening is, and especially the last 3 months, and I can never tell, and nobody's ever going to tell you the truth. But I think a lot of it has to do with the political, the political campaigns. There's a lot of messages back and forth with a lot of the political campaigns. On top of that, investors are sending messages. So the carriers, the past 3 months, got very, very, and this is literally the past 3 months where a lot of changes were made. And the carriers got very defensive of what messages they actually let through to their subscribers. So what's happening is, our system sends out messages, and we use a lot of for lack of better words, let's say third-party vendors to send. So they're kind of like the middlemen. Some of you guys know me. Obviously, like Twilio, there's Bandwidth, a lot of these carriers that you can connect to, and then they basically send the messages to Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint. The messages, a lot of times what happens is they get blocked by the receiving provider, meaning Verizon, AT&T. And it's not so much, like those middlemen, like even us as a middleman. It's not, we basically send, hey, we have a message, the user is sending, writing a message, they're clicking send, we let the message go, and then the message actually never gets to the actual end user. And the reason is because Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, they're blocking a lot of these messages in masses. And again, more so the past 2-3 months is where a lot of the changes were made. A lot of, and nobody's actually checking those messages, manually. I mean, all of this is computer algorithms, softwares, and trying to pick up and identify similar messages. So for instance, let's say I send you a message, hey, Zach, would you like to sell your house? And you say, stop. So then the next person behind me says, hey, Zach, would you like to sell your house? You say, stop. And then the third person that tries to contact you, Verizon, let's say, I'm not sure what carrier you're with, but let's say Verizon is going to say, hey, this Zach responded twice to the same message. We're just going to completely block that message to get it going into Zach's phone. So this is what a lot of these users are seeing. Hey, the third person is going to say, so the first and second person are going to say, okay, at least I got a response. The third person is going to say, hey, well, the system's broken. I never got a response. So what a lot of these users, can do, and if you see on Facebook and all of these things, and we got a lot of people in our chat requests, trying to talk to support. Hey, what is the magical message that I should send to sellers? What is the magical list? What is the magical message that I should send to sellers to get them to respond? So we try to stay away from actually providing any kind of messages or templates type thing, because as soon as if we provide the template, then there's like 2,000 users that potentially use the template, and all of those 2,000 users are going to get blocked. The first couple will get through, and then the other ones are going to get blocked automatically. So what a lot of the users, if you're sending messages, what you can do is really pay attention to a lot of your templates. And again, it's very, very easy for companies like Verizon, AT&T to block messages that look similar. I got an email about 2 weeks ago from one of our carriers saying, literally, the email said, "Hey, are you providing templates to your users? Because a lot of the messages are literally the same." And my response obviously was, "No, we don't provide any templates." But looking through the messages, everybody's saying, "Hey, my name is, hey, is this, name? Is this, let's say, the homeowner? I'm a local investor. Would you be interested in selling your house?" That's the message that goes out. And those messages are getting filtered out. And again, it's not from our system. It's not from my competitors' systems. It's not from even Twilio or the other vendors. Verizon, AT&T are preventing those messages from going to their subscribers. So the texting game is definitely going to change. It definitely has changed from what it was even 6 months ago. I can tell you that it's definitely going to change, and a lot more restrictions are going to go in place. I think it's for people that are sending, thousands and thousands of messages a day is long and is gone. I mean, you could potentially still do it in some way, shape, or form for the most part now, but it's going to very soon be unrealistic. And part of it is because not just Verizon, AT&T, even though they're using third-party applications to block a lot of these messages, and they have their own algorithms, but then Google and Apple are both doing additional steps to be able to prevent people from being spammed in a way, because a lot of these messages, I mean, you may think that you're not spamming them, but a lot of people are complaining from that they're getting spammed from investors. We have some sellers in our platform that have been messaged, upwards of 80 times from our system. So, it's one of those things that it's very, very saturated. About a year and actually I started texting in December 2017 is when I started texting. And, I can send 800 messages from a single phone number. And we were one of those people that were blasting the whole county. We had the whole county's numbers, and we were just sending messages left and right. But at the time, again, it was a different, there were different times to where, nobody was paying attention to a lot of these blockages, templates, obviously rotating templates and messages helps. But you can only get so far with blasting so many people.
Yeah. I feel like an old man talking with you about that, because I didn't text in December 2017, but I remember Bandit Slide didn't work, so I started cold calling in 2017, and that was where anyone started cold calling my market, and I was like, oh my gosh, I go back to the good old days. But my next question here for you is, this is pretty obvious, but there's a lot of people saying, SMS is dead, don't do it anymore. From your experience with your users, I mean, especially with me, people are still getting SMS deals, right?
Yeah, definitely. So it's one of those things that, like I said, like I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier ago, people that are lazy are probably they're probably going to do what the other person is doing, and it may not work eventually. It may not work for them when they want to see results. You really have to be creative, even changing up your messages. We have some people that are really being creative and sending messages like, hey, for instance, I'm just going to give you an example of a message. Hey, did you get the letter that I sent you in the mail? And then usually people respond like, who is this? And then the conversation happens. You're trying to kind of get that first response. And text messaging is not dead. Just a couple weeks ago, one of my friends, he texted me, hey, system's working great. Actually, two people texted me in the past 10 days saying, hey, I got 14 deals this month from batch leads. It works great. And then at the same time, there's people that are saying like, hey, I can't send a single message because I'm not getting any responses. And again, Unfortunately, there's only so much that we can do. And then there's only so much that even like a lot of my competitors, they're in the same kind of ball game that we are on trying to send messages and trying to figure out, carrier patterns and, when to send and when not to send. But again, we can only do so much. If Verizon, AT&T want to block it, they can absolutely block a lot of these messages.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cold calling works, text messaging works, and in our kind of in our kind of industry, things just go in a circle. Direct mail was working in 2015. And cold calling was working 2017, let's say, text messaging was working 2018, 2019, and next year it may go back to, who knows? I mean, cold calling again. It just things go in circle. When everybody starts doing something, you have to kind of look the other way sometimes and figure out, what other people are not doing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. It just scares me because I remember RVMs in Florida completely. Right. I used to just destroy it with it. And, I know people in Florida, wholesalers, $50,000 fines they're getting from the state. I'm out. So it's the legal stuff's crazy, but with SMS, I mean, it's always just it's always a cat and mouse game. I mean, I feel guilty because I gave out free texting scripts and thousands of people start using them, and now I got to switch up my own business. But 100%, I mean, being creative is the number one thing that saved me in SMS. I mean, I was using the same ones. They went down to 75%. I don't want to reveal it because then thousands of people are going to use it, but I kind of did something very similar to what you said, like, hey, to get my letter in the mail. Those work really well. I mean, I go crazy on them, but my next question here is for SMS, especially next year. You kind of alluded to being very creative. Is there any other tips you can give for people that have just started? They just signed up. Maybe, they use one of the links. They got a free text. And like, what can they do to kind of stand out in like a crazy market like Phoenix?
Yeah. So we have a lot of like users just in Phoenix alone, obviously in our platform. I mean, even like all of the major cities, there's just a lot of users that are texting the same sellers and same. I mean, it's like a bloodbath out there with text messages, to be honest. And I mean, there's a couple of variables that any user can control. So it's how frequently are you sending, the frequency of this message sendings, how many phone numbers are you sending from, and then the content of the actual messages. Those really are the things that a typical user can control. We try to slow down and limit some of those variables to where, like, hey, even if you click that button 300 times in let's say 10 20 seconds, we're going to slow down that sending to where it's not like bombarding people, because at that point all of those messages are going to get completely filtered out. The frequency of sending is something that's that's something that's actually going to get more and more relevant, because recently, I mean about 3 months ago, one of our vendors said, hey, we're going to start implementing some kind of pausing features to where, I mean, again, this is all proprietary technology and nobody would ever disclose even to our vendors. I mean, Verizon, they're not going to disclose to our vendors even how they're filtering messages exactly, because the whole idea is they don't want anybody, reverse engineering their algorithms and figuring out how to get around their filters. So, but there are certain things like, for instance, let's say, like I mentioned earlier, let's say I send you a message, the other person sends you, or actually, let's say I send you a message and then I send, let's say your dad a message or somebody else, and then 3, 4, 5 people respond, stop. That my phone number is going to get basically paused from the carrier's perspective. They're going to like literally reject every single thing from that phone number for X amount of time. And the X amount of time is the thing that is proprietary to every single carrier. And I've seen sometimes numbers get released for from about 2 hours on the low end. I've seen some numbers get blocked for up to 3 weeks. So again, the more numbers you actually have in your platform, the more numbers you're sending from, the lower the actual volume for each message, the lower number of messages going out per phone number. And then obviously the content. Those are a lot of the variables that the user can control. And then I think the most challenging one for a lot of the users is the content, because unfortunately, everybody's trying to get to the same question. Do you want to sell your house? And it is challenging. It becomes challenging, figuring out, hey, how do I beat around the bush to be able to come up with that message that will get delivered? And again, you just have to be creative. I've seen, like I mentioned, I've seen people just try to get a response. I've seen people literally just send out, hey, in the first message, question mark. It's those types of strategies that sometimes, some investors can succeed and some are just going to be blocked from the carriers. And what our system does, and even like Twilio, Twilio is obviously a publicly traded company. They in their documentation, they say that, hey, we don't actually know when a phone number actually gets blocked. Sometimes we do, but we get a response from it, and we basically every time we get hey, this message is blocked, and literally the block says carrier violation. One of it says carrier violation. The other vendor gives us, blocked due to spam filtering. And again, but again, some of those numbers we just don't know. Verizon, carriers will sometimes absorb that number, not release any information on it. If they blocked it, they delivered it, and we just relay to the user whatever information we know. So again, those are the variables that a user can control.
Okay. I mean, I still think SMS is still worth it. I mean, from you've probably on a customer service, you get people saying this doesn't work. It's a scam. It doesn't work. What's the number one mistake you see from leads users? Like the number one mistake that everyone makes?
It's a tough question actually, because I mean, so in the day-to-day, like a lot of the support chats, but I would say the biggest mistake is honestly just hearing somebody getting a generic script from Facebook, like in Facebook groups, and I mentioned to it earlier. Somebody will say, "Hey, what script do you use? What message?" And instead of spending a couple hours of thinking like, "Hey, how do I create 10 or 15 or 20 messages that I think would work?" and then trying it out, they're focused on spending 5 hours looking through Facebook groups to figure out what message people are sending so they can send the exact same message. And I see that being the biggest issue with a lot of people that are just starting out.
Okay.
And honestly, like I used to feel a lot of times the same way. Even with direct mail, well, what postcard works? What postcard? What list are you supposed to mail to? And that was my thinking, 5-6 years ago. So it's just that in my experience, everything works. You just have to be consistent at it, and everything can work.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, consistency is everything. I mean, the SMS side's amazing too. Another question I really want to ask you is, I don't get to talk to many people that, weren't born in the United States. They came here and then became elite wholesalers. I think there's a very low amount of people in this whole country that does something that I've gotten maybe 10 messages this month. It's kind of weird before I had you on. You're a killer out there in acquisitions, but there's a lot of people that they've came from abroad and they came to the United States at the age of 20, and they don't think they can actually get deals done. What are some tips you can give to people getting acquisitions wise? Is if English is their second language, what tips can you give them to succeed in wholesale?
Yeah, so obviously, I struggled with English. I had I came here when I was 11. I was almost 12 when I came to the US. So I had absolutely I didn't know English. The only word that I know is probably hi and bye. And my first year in school, I had to basically copy. They literally told me, "Hey, copy this guy over here. Whatever he does, you do it. So at least we can pass you, because you don't speak English." And that's how literally my 6th grade was. But I've just personally always wanted to succeed and kind of push and persevere. And anybody coming to the US and English is a second language, that's not an excuse. I do know people. I do know a few people that after 10 or 15, 20, even 20 years of being in the US, they still say, "Well, I don't know English very well." And that's the biggest BS that I've ever heard, to be honest. Honestly, that is such an excuse to hey, you've been here 10 years and you're still blaming English for your lack of success. That's just not acceptable. It's just not. If you want to succeed, you only need to literally get around. I know people that on the reverse side, I know people that still to this day, the majority of people would not be able to understand their dialect, but they're successful in life because they persevere and they push through things. And it's one of those things that if you want it bad enough, you will make it happen. And if you want to wait for somebody to for money to fall out of the sky, then maybe you should wait. And
Yeah, I mean that's pretty inspirational. I think anyone sends me, I'm just going to send them this video, but I've seen people the exact same way. I mean, it's always an excuse, in my opinion here. But my next question here for you before we get in. So, guys, ask your questions for Ivo. Not many type of people you get Ivo on here for a question. So this guy knows this.
I haven't been. I used to do a bunch of podcasts. I haven't been on a podcast in probably like 5 or 6 months, to be honest. I've just been like so busy that I haven't been on a podcast recently.
I know. I tried finding some podcasts to listen to yesterday. I was working out to like kind of prep for this.
And you know, when you actually reached out to me a while back, like I was doing some podcasts, but as of right now, like I pretty much stopped. I just don't have the time to. Honestly, I don't.
I know. I remember talking to Jesse and Nanny. They're like, "Oh, we're booked." I don't know how I got this. So it's amazing I got you on. So guys, ask your questions. So my question for you here is, you're not out here going on appointments every single day. I mean, you got some pretty, I'd say, bigger stuff going on. Back then, now, what were some of your? Because you're not really into coaching. What was like some of your hidden secrets in acquisitions? Because I mean, you're probably one of the most insane markets ever. What was your secrets to getting deals in competitive markets?
Honestly, man, it was just being consistent. As much as I say, like I have like some secret ingredient, like I had no, like, I mean, I was like after every single list that I could get my hands on, again, like trying to figure out like what lists like, you know, would work best. Tracking my numbers was a huge thing that I kind of messed up on in the beginning of my career. Because what happened is, and I'll just kind of briefly mention it, again, like let's say through like with kind of getting coaching from like Sean Terry back in the day, is I really started to like, hey, I want to have all of my KPIs dialed in like so well to the point where like I know literally every single cent and every single marketing channel and everything, like, and it got like so overwhelming, and I'm like, you know, this is just like I was to get it like perfect, and it just never was perfect. And I was like to the point where it's like, wow, this thing is taking me like, let's say doing my KPIs, let's say, you know, this like 5-6 years ago, doing my KPIs is like takes me 2 hours, you know, 3 hours a week. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like every time, like I do it for 2 weeks, and then third week it's like, wow, I need like 3 hours to like spend on doing those KPIs now. And it was just it was a mistake that I made, that I should have started off like, hey, what are the top 4 or 5 key metrics that I need to know for me to be able to run my business as a business? And then as time goes by, you know, I'll dial in some of those other, you know, additional 4 or 5 or 10 numbers that I really would want to know. So the mistake that I made back in the day was, again, I wanted to track things so granularly that it just didn't work out for me. I tried it twice. I said, you know, this is not working. The first time I said, this is not working. I'm scratching everything, starting from scratch. I made the exact same mistake on trying to track down. Like, I mean, I had a spreadsheet of like, it was like 5 different Excel tab sheets that I was tracking. And then the third, like again, the second, third, fourth week that I'm having to do those numbers, I'm like, oh my God, this is like just taking forever. And then, but again, I should have started off with starting simple with my KPIs, knowing those 4 or 5 variables. And just I have to know like the numbers, you know, how many leads per, you know, how many appointments are you going on, you know, how many leads are you getting in the door, what's your close ratio, those types of things you have to know. And then the rest is like, hey, like figure out what systems you're going to use. And, you know, I used to use like, without exaggeration, 22 plus different systems to be able to run a business, which is obviously not the case today. I mean, you can use actually, like, you know, obviously a couple of our products and plus a CRM, let's say whatever you use, Podio, or, you know, there's a couple, you know, great CRMs out there, and run a successful operation. But back in the day, it wasn't the case. So I was, again, just being consistent. I was getting lists. I was marketing. At the time, you know, I was doing direct mail, cold calling. In 2017, I started doing text messages like towards the later November, December of 2017. But it's just really staying consistent and not giving up. I mean, every lead could be a potential deal. And I was trying to kind of like, you know, milk every single lead as best as I could. And yeah, things fell through the cracks. Absolutely. Like it wasn't perfect. But, you know, it's progress over perfection.
Oh yeah, 100% there.
Yeah.
So let's get some questions here from the audience here. So let's see. Keep going. Good info. Antonio says Batch Leads is in my market in Fayetteville. Are you guys in North Carolina?
Absolutely. We're nationwide.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was thinking. I love doing SMS. Say that again.
I'm not sure. I mean, why he would think that we're not in North Carolina, but yeah, Batch Leads should have nationwide data. So
100%. I do. I literally use Batch Leads for not Fayetteville, but like by Asheville. I mean, I do pretty well on that one. But everyone does it now. Get replies. I still like a channel though. Let's see. Dave asks. I mean, I think you know the answer. What program does Ivo use? I just joined.
Well,
Batch Leads.
What program?
What program does Ivo use?
I mean, I'll give you like, I mean, obviously, like this is like a selfless plug, but I mean, we have like obviously a couple of different platforms. So Batch Leads is the data management platform, and Zach, you're obviously on Batch Driven, which is more geared towards like beginner wholesalers. And if you want to like drive for dollars, and obviously we have the virtual drive for dollars now, which you can do. That's more again just on a lower level. And then obviously we just rolled out the Batch Dialer, which is a cold calling platform. And those are primarily the platforms that we have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty good. So yeah, smszac.com if you want 500 texts. Let's see here. Truebrook, investor test. Do you only have to be creative for the initial text? Once the seller responds, is it okay to send a message about the home without getting blocked after the initial text?
Yes, that's always been the case. However, recently I have started to see some of our backend numbers that some of those messages are getting filtered out. As much as yes. And that's just literally the past 2-3 months, but on a very, very lower as far as a percentage level, it's much lower overall, much lower. So yeah. I mean, the quick answer is yes.
Okay. I mean, I guess in that case, what would you say? Try to get people on the phone as quick as possible.
Get people on the phone. I mean, you can continue the conversation. Obviously, I mean, like if they're responding to you, carriers are going to allow those messages through. If they're saying, if a lot of people are, as soon as you ask them about their house and they say stop spam, take me off your list, and then that happens, at a high percentage, then that number may start getting blocked more frequently.
Mm-hmm. Eric asks, what advice do you have for those who are working small niche focus lists through Batch SMS platform?
I think that's how the majority of people should actually be gearing. Like that is actually the best case scenario. And I'm just not sure what your question specifically is, but I think that working with like basically list stacking and sending, maybe to a 50, 100, let's say I'm just talking some numbers, 50, 100 messages, let's say a day, like those will get delivered. And you can obviously like list stack and figure out, hey, who are, out of my database, and let's say you have 50,000 or 100,000 properties in there. There's only probably, 200-300 of them that are potential sellers, to be honest. Obviously, you know that. And if you can identify those through list stacking and send those messages, like if you're sending, 100 messages, 200 messages a day, you're not going to have any problems getting blocked overall. I mean, again, things you can always get blocked depending on the content you're sending, but for the most part, those messages are going to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the niche lists are great. Other question here is, I don't know if that for me, what percentage of the wholesale business is SMS for you, and what is second or first focus in marketing? I guess question for me, I would say SMS is probably the second biggest marketing channel I have right now. Obviously, I can't do 10,000 texts a day, but it's direct mail, SMS, and then I got some other ones I work on, but I can tell you a little later. But yeah, there. Then for my first focus is always direct mail, but I always go crazy on this on SMS. But really important question. Some dude named Jesse wants to ask, who's your favorite business partner?
I'm gonna name two, Jesse and Annie.
Okay. I'm gonna start response rates. Reggie, I think Reggie's a little late to the party. I talked about this a little earlier, but he wants to know opt-out messages near the end of the text. Is this something that's going to be permanent? I've noticed my response rates have dropped due to this.
So a lot of those things are actually required by the actual carriers. They're going to start blocking messages if you're not responding. We were actually required. The platform was required, as were like a lot of different platforms out there. So if you find, let's say, theoretically a platform that doesn't require you to do that, they are probably within the next month, or they're going to completely get shut down.
100%. And last question here from Truebrook. Will you be adding RVMs, or is it not worth it to do ringless voicemails?
To be honest, we're thinking about it. We just had a conversation actually today about it, and we may. There's always laws and things that we have to consider on a nationwide scale. Obviously, Florida and Michigan being one of those states that are that there's more like litigations when it comes to RVMs and ringless voicemails. But it's something we're considering. So if you go to featureupvote.batchleads.io, you would be able to just put it in there. And I think it's probably already as a suggestion. If it gets obviously voted up, it's something that we're considering.
Okay. And then we got Annie in the house. Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, Annie's texting me like, call me ASAP. Like,
oh my gosh. Yeah, so that's it, guys. I really appreciate you coming on here. Before we head off here, Ivo, is there any advice or comments you want to tell the audience before we sign off?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of just staying consistent. A lot of our platforms work for people that actually use them the way they're intended to be used. Text messaging works, cold calling works. I think virtual drawing for dollars is going to be the next kind of big thing in my opinion, because it's something the carriers nobody can actually stop you from actually virtually drawing for dollars, and that's where obviously our batch-driven platform comes in play. So cold calling is always going to work. You just have to be consistent. Really, some things you're going to hit some dead ends sometimes, and you just have to kind of persevere and push through them.
Boom. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I can't wait to see you guys next week. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks.